but most of you in Europe have got similar legislation because there's a European directive that puts in place that each of the member countries should have put in place sustainability things. Understand what we mean by the term carbon footprint. Who doesn't know what carbon footprint means? This isn't a mocking. Most of you understand what carbon footprint means in your day-to-day life, which is good. Understand how we calculate the dental carbon footprint. Understand what it makes up, understand how to reduce it. And then I'm going to talk about some current research projects that we're involved in. I was just handed your magazine, if that's the right word for it. Really quite useful, and a really good article in it on sustainability. And it's interesting because I didn't even know about the work that they're doing in Bonn. I didn't know about, there's lots of bits of sustainability happening internationally that unless they're published or unless they're online, we are unaware of it. So this really focuses on the stuff that we are doing. I should say also we've got two Health Education England fellows here today in the front row. That's Darshini and Sarah. They may be involved in the roundtable discussion. I hope they are involved in the roundtable discussion that we're going to have after this. So what is sustainability? It's fairly simple, and I'm hoping that all of you, being young, understand this already. Basically, it means that we meet our own needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And you think about what we do in a dental practice, the amount of plastic that we generate and use, the amount of materials that we generate and use, the amount of fossil fuels that we use. We can't keep that up generation after generation after generation. And it's your generation that is going to be much more hardly hit by this than me. So again, sustainability in a wider sense, you'll all have different things that sustainability means to you. I put random stuff up. My good friend in Edinburgh is involved in pollination research, so he's always stressing to me about how the bees are disappearing. And it's kind of random when we're talking about a dental thing. But it's actually something that you could even sort, not even sort, but there is all these things you have influence over on an individual basis. So what's causing the bees to disappear? And they talk about pesticides and lack of flora and fauna, etc. These are where your plastic bottles are going to end up, some of them. And for those of you who have been watching any of the David Attenborough documentaries, Planet Earth, or even just other documentaries that I've been seeing recently about little Pacific islanders where they are just flooded with plastic. And again, we have to do something about this. Air quality. Your patients travelling to your dental practices are travelling in cars that are producing not only that are using fossil fuels, but are affecting our air quality. And then there's all the species and stuff declining. Now, I know that's all broad brush stuff, but we have to do something about it, and healthcare is contributing to this. Hospitals and healthcare are designed to make us all healthier, but they're not making us healthier. They're making us healthier, but they're also contributing quite significantly to this problem. Sea level rise. Probably not a good idea to buy beachfront properties that are really close to sea levels. Guys, I know that I've been trying for a while to buy a house in Barcelona, and I'd like it to be close to the beach, but I'm not going to be too close because I want that property for 20, 30, 40 years, and we're not quite sure how much these sea levels will rise. And they're rising quicker than we thought they would. So European law. We have a 2030 climate and energy framework that was agreed about 3.5 years ago that committed the EU to a 40% reduction in greenhouse gases relative to 1990. And for those of you who think that's totally irrelevant to you and that's cool and that'll just go on in the background while you restore your population's teeth and provide care for them, this is starting to affect us more and more. In hospitals in the UK, a lot of hospitals now are mandated to reduce their EU regulations and are fined if they don't. as dental practices, you may or may not be governed by this law, but you do need to think about it. And we have an Irish law, and we have a UK law. Both of these are matching that European directive, but I'm not going to go so much into this because it's not so relative. The Lancet has published a couple of really nice papers on this, saying basically, obviously, concerned about the relationship between climate change and health. Any thoughts on why climate change is important to general health? Can I ask questions? Am I allowed to ask questions? This time I do want answers. So how is climate change going to affect health?
Cancer.
Possibly, but where's the connection?
More UV of the ozone layer being depleted.
That's true, and my father is actually got malignant melanoma at the moment, possibly for that same reason, because Western countries destroyed our ozone layer in New Zealand. Can I say that? That's probably a bit much of a connection. But yes, cancer. Any other? Diet?
Yes, so it kind of affect farming and rural things to affect the availability of use.
Yeah, so all the pesticides we're using in Europe, you could write for huge amounts of time on that. We've got issues with pesticides, issues with pollination, issues with droughts, extreme weather conditions, harder to grow food, etc. And sustainability of food for countries. Does each European country, for example, grow enough food for itself? The UK doesn't, as an example. We may struggle in Brexit because of that. Good answers coming. Any more?
Disease.
Yeah, I mean.
Okay, like for tropical insects and stuff.
That's right. And tropical diseases are increasing and changing their geographical location. Mosquitoes are changing where they are because the planet is getting warmer in different places. So there's, you could list hundreds of diseases that are going to change quite quickly over the next few years because of climate change, and this is why the Lancet has found it really important to publish. The World Dental Federation, anybody know what they are doing with sustainability? And this is actually quite recent, which is quite exciting for me. But they have basically, I've actually got it here, they've basically signed off an agenda, I think it was October last year, where they have put in a number of action points that they want all their members to consider about becoming more sustainable, and they're highlighting how important it is to become sustainable in dentistry. We've got the Sustainable Development Goals, 1 to 17. Again, not so relevant. They are very relevant, but not so perhaps you're not really going to think about these as you practice on a day-to-day basis. There you go, the slides are just out of order. There's the Federation of the World Dental Federation. Prevention and sustainability is really, really important, so they've got that as their number one point. Sustainable dentistry is preventable dentistry. If we can stop people coming to the dentist, dentistry becomes sustainable. Actually, if we remove all their teeth, dentistry becomes quite sustainable too, because they don't have to come back. This is about, there's a line between when dentistry becomes sustainable and optimizing dental practice, and it's finding that balance. But fluoride is a very preventable type product, and therefore it's a very sustainable type product because it reduces patient visits, it reduces the type of restorations we do, etc. And this is all makes dentistry more sustainable. But the FDI continues to go, the dentist should take steps to educate all the dental team on sustainability practice. Well, how can we educate our dental team on sustainability practice? How many of you have actually been educated on sustainable dental practice? No one. So good luck with point number 2 then. Excuse me. Wherever possible, dentistry should reduce the consumption of energy, water, and paper. Paper was a bit of an ongoing joke for us in Yale University because it's kind of one of those things, double-sided printing. All we need to do is do double-sided printing, and we've sorted it all. It's just a bit of a joke because it's just a very, very small behavioural change thing that you can do. It's important, but it's interesting that it's made it to their 10 top tips. Dentistry should consider the environment when deciding to use a single-use, disposable, or reusable product. Which is better for the environment, do you think? A single-use product that we use and throw away to fall on a beach in the Pacific Island one day, or a reusable product that we have to use energy to wash, we have to use scarce water to wash, we have to sterilise it, we have to package it in plastic, etc. Any thoughts on what is actually better for the environment? I didn't really help you with the way I phrased it. It's actually a reusable product. So anybody introducing introducing single-use items, try and discourage them not to. And there's starting to be increasing literature. And again, I'm just quite aware of it because I was just at Yale listening to other healthcare sustainability people talk about this. Disposable gowns are not good. Reusable gowns are the way to go. And in the dental hospital in Dublin, we've just introduced single-use gowns. But then we knew plastic bags were wrong in the 1980s, and we introduced those as well in supermarkets, so who knows. Dental manufacturers should be encouraged to develop more sustainable dental materials and technologies. Again, this is really quite slow, and we need to lobby. I'm interested in your colleague coming today who is a lobbyist. We need to lobby European Union to ensure that suppliers of medical products and dental products, etc., do some work on their products because there's nothing done. I'm trying to work with the British Dental Industry Association. I got an email a couple of days ago saying that they are interested in working, but there's no mandate for them to do it. If you as dentists ask your suppliers how sustainable are your products, that might encourage them to think about it seriously. But this has really changed. If I had stood up 5 years ago and given you guys a presentation on sustainability, half of you probably would have gone and done a tour of Amsterdam because you would have thought, what's the point? It's really becoming more mainstream now that suppliers need to work with us. What else? National authorities should stimulate research sustainability. Again, I ask you, which of your dental associations have published on sustainability? Has anybody, apart from that paper in your journal or your magazine, has anybody seen an article on sustainability? Can I ask? So again, encourage your dental associations, your national dental associations to do more. And again, the General Dental Council is quite keen to engage us on becoming more sustainable, but what about your individual dental councils? Just change slides and I just close them. These are kind of principles that we use in the UK, that a healthy society depends on a healthy environment. The health and care system needs to be increasingly aware of the benefits of developing resilient communities. And thirdly, the health and care system needs to take every opportunity to work with people to prevent the preventable. And I was interested that you heard Nigel Pitts speak a couple of weeks ago on Child Smile. I was involved in Scotland for about 6 or 7 years ago with Nigel Pitts helping set up Child Smile. Again, if you're serious about sustainability, you need a child prevention. You need a national child prevention program like Child Smile. We don't have one in Ireland, and I suspect that most of your European countries don't have one that is as comprehensive as Child Smile. Most of your countries, I hope, would have a sustainable strategy. Ireland has only just got one. The UK's had one for about 3 or 4 years. If you're interested in sustainable development in the healthcare system, you need to look at the UK because they're pretty much a world leader on this. So what do we understand by carbon footprint? Well, you all told me that you know what this is. Academically, it's the sum of direct and indirect greenhouse gases. So it's not just carbon dioxide. It's also carbon monoxide. It's also nitrous oxide. How many have used nitrous oxide in the room? So we've got a handful. Where does it go when you've used it? Put outside. That's the point. So it's great. We protect ourselves because no one wants to breathe nitrous oxide, but we don't protect the planet. It just goes up there and it harms the atmosphere. There's no mandate for us to, there's no law, there's no requirement for us to collect that nitrous oxide, but there is the technology to collect it and reverse it and break it down into harmless products. Don't ask me what harmless products are because I'm not a chemist. But they do exist. It's expensive, but it's increasing. But it should be, if it was made compulsory by the European governments, then it should happen. The reason nitrous oxide is so important is that it's a very, very toxic gas. I'm not sure how much more toxic it is than carbon dioxide. I look at Darshini, sorry. Thoughts here. It's something like 10 times as strong. But it's a very, very potent gas, and it's really, really quite destructive. And it's also a carbon dioxide equivalent gas. This is what I was talking to Sarah about this morning. This is not a good slide. Slide should just have like a picture of a bee or something like that. This just goes on and on and on. Why is carbon footprint so important? Basically because an increase in greenhouse gases and therefore in carbon footprint is the primary event associated with climate change. So a lot of our work is associated with carbon dioxide emissions, especially 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. We talk about the carbon footprint. It's helping us to engage, but sustainable dentistry is far bigger than the carbon footprint. It's about plastic bottles. It's about anything that we do that we can't do forever because it's not sustainable. And this presentation is quite heavily focused on the carbon footprint. So why do we measure carbon? We hope that one day it will be as important as money. And again, now I keep going on about Yale, but it's just fresh in my mind because I was there 2 days ago. We had quite a number of discussions there about if governments taxed carbon dioxide emissions, then the decisions that we made would actually just happen overnight because things that are really, really quite potent or toxic or important when it comes to carbon dioxide equivalents would suddenly become very, very expensive to do. So they're really quite cheap comparatively. Nitrous oxide visit, and it's a lot cheaper than going down intravenous route or the general anaesthetic route, would become quite expensive. And then we would, before we gave our patients nitrous oxide, we would think, well, God, actually, we can't do this. We've really got to try and to do it without nitrous oxide. Or we've really got to get a nitrous oxide collector and reverser to stop that so it becomes cheaper. And if we price the gowns that I was talking about before, it would automatically make sense for the dental hospitals or your own practices to do the right thing. So we're hoping that one day carbon will be as important as money because you have to think about it when you commission your healthcare. And again, this isn't far off. We were speaking about, we had an Australian colleague there at this conference, and we were saying, how green is Australia? And my colleague said, well, Australia was the first country in the world to get rid of its carbon tax. And this is like, we were thinking, what, to introduce carbon tax? He was like, no, we introduced a carbon tax a few years ago, and the recent government got rid of it. But again, most European countries have to have some sort of way of regulating carbon. And there is carbon tax, etc., and we'll talk about this. So if we can, so carbon dioxide is also important about service redesign. As a specialist in dental public health, I'm interested in how we develop a service, how we might look at child smart, for example, or we might look at the service that provides orthodontics. We should be interested when we're looking at this service not just about the quality of care or the type of care that it gives patients, but also about how much carbon dioxide does that particular service produce. Child smart, for example, would be a very good service when it comes to carbon dioxide reduction because we know that it reduces dental disease. And it would also enable, if we knew about carbon for everything, it would also enable us to compare higher and lower carbon interventions and products. And it would also enable us, the carbon dioxide type of tax would also enable us to engage public, engage staff, engage suppliers. So the NHS carbon footprint in the UK, how are we doing? We're not meeting our targets. And the NHS has a sustainable development strategy. We also, each hospital, each healthcare system, apart from dentistry, has to complete a sustainable return every year. That's quite innovative. Bet if you went back to your own individual European countries and asked your hospitals whether they had to do a sustainable return every year, the answer would be no. But it's going to come. It has to come as your countries think about this European mandate. So what do we include in carbon footprint? We include all these things and we label them Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3. So we're interested in basically everything that you do that produces carbon dioxide in your practice, but also we're interested in how far your patients travel. So those of you who are working in really remote communities or who will be working in really remote surgeries, think about how far your patients travel when they come. Is there any way you can influence patient travel? That's the question.
We have a thing in dental tourism that I'm from Rijeka and a lot of talent comes there. So some clinics did a minibus. Like they're collecting people from, I don't know, Trieste or somewhere, and so they group them together in a minibus. So it's less kind of less emissions and everything because there's just one minibus, not 10 cars.
Yeah, and that's a really good way. So you're organising public transport, you're getting 4 or 5 people there at a time. But are they doing it for the emissions or are they doing it for
they're doing it for their own thing, but
yeah. No, but it's a good point. And that's it. With sustainability, you often have to think about cost. Cost and sustainability usually work hand in hand, and they're doing it for cost, or they're doing it for convenience, or they're doing it just for social good. But they are reducing their carbon emissions at the same time. Any other thoughts? And we are in the Netherlands. Give you a hint. Sorry. Bicycles, free bicycles. Making sure that you've got secure storage when they get to your dental practice. If you're a staff member of a practice, will you be cycling to work and and I've done this, have to go to the toilet and get lots of towels and wipe the sweat off and then put your clinic gown on, because that's the only way that you can manage to work? Or will they provide you with a shower? Will they provide you with secure cycle storage, etc.? And when you cycle, are you sharing? Is it like cycling on an American road where you're sharing a very narrow road with lots of busy cars, or do you have an integrated series of actual cycle paths, which are more than just a white line on a road? So there's lots of ways we can actually influence travel, more than we think. This was our carbon footprint breakdown of the general NHS. It's quite important to look at this because 61% of it was the stuff that we buy. Has anyone ever seen a product where it tells you what the carbon footprint is? Was?
No.
Has anyone?
Usually the ones with zero carbon footprints show that, but
yeah, and you've got to be careful. For a start, that's a good point, because nothing has a zero carbon footprint. People go, oh, this was zero carbon footprint. It can't. Every time you do something, you produce carbon dioxide. They may offset their carbon by buying trees, etc., but that's also just delaying the carbon that's going to be emitted into the atmosphere, unless it's, of course, used as wood, etc. There was in Tesco, which is a really large UK supermarket, they used to have milk, and the milk used to say, I can't remember what the product was, but the number was, but it used to say, this 500 millilitres of milk was 500 grams to produce. That would actually be my vision, is that in, say, 10, 20, 30 years, we're lucky, we will have every product that we consume has met a minimum carbon footprint, or actually has on here, as part of your nutritional label. I'm using this plastic bottle, but I'm not going to drink it. It actually has this bottle has 30 grams of carbon dioxide, etc. Because if I say to you as your dental practice, my God, your carbon footprint is 5 times as high as it should be, and don't forget I think the European carbon footprint is about 2.5, 3 times. We produce 2.5 to 3 times as much carbon in Europe as we should do to keep the planet sustainable. So if I say to you, your carbon footprint as a dentist is 2 to 3 times as high as it should be, now reduce it. Sorry, you're in a hospital because this is the hospital. How do you reduce it if 61% of your, 70%, I see now the procurement's 9%, the 70% of the service you buy either as procurement or as services that you commission. How do you reduce it? You can't tell. If I gave you 5 boxes of gloves, one produced in Eastern Europe, one produced in the UK, one produced in America, one produced in China, how do you know how big those carbon footprint is? You don't, is the answer. And I think that's really important. That's why we need to engage with manufacturers. So have a look at this, have a look at the travel. You can see that the travel is only 13%. And then I'll talk about how where it's all coming from in dentistry. I'm going to skip through this, but this is a study that we did about 2 years ago. We looked at every single dental procedure that we did in the dental practice. We then did a process map, which I won't go through. We did an inventory of all the resources that we used. So how much human time, what did we use, gloves, electricity, etc., etc. We excluded capital items. I'll just touch on this. So when you do a carbon footprint, you look at everything that we do. We look at the energy that we use. We look at the travel. We look at the stuff that we buy. We look at the products that we make. We talked about all this. So if I have 10 quite old dental practices, they're 1940s, 1930s wooden places, and those of you in Scandinavia will be used to that fact. In New Zealand, we also use wood a lot to build houses. We have dental practices there. We do carbon footprints for those 10 dental practices, and they all each say have 2,000 patients each. And then we think, no, actually, we can provide care for those 20,000 patients in a really large, modern place like this. So we build it. Which has the lowest carbon footprint per patient? The really new building or the older 1940s practices? Any thoughts?
Older ones.
Why?
Because they probably produce less energy, because the newer ones have more technological parts rather than having the old parts.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's actually not what we're told, and most of the literature says that if you build a building like this, its energy efficiency will be amazing, its water consumption will be amazing. We've got all these new cool products, but you are actually right. When we did a study in dentistry in Scotland in 2012, we discovered it was actually all our little dental surgeries that were really quite environmentally friendly. And they were environmentally friendly because they didn't have air conditioning. We live in Scotland, we really don't need air conditioning. We just open the window, and that's only 2 days a year. Our heating was an old boiler that we had tiny little waiting rooms, but they were enough because we had small surgeries and they were big enough. But the main thing being is, think how much concrete it took to build this building. This building that we're in is a great example. Building cement, concrete, is hugely environmentally damaging. So when organisations say, we're going to knock down your 3 hospitals and we're going to build this most amazing, renewable, the energy efficient building is going to be amazing, it's actually quite concerning for the environment because the amount of carbon that it takes to produce this building, these type of buildings, is horrific. And yet we exclude capital items when we do our carbon footprint. So what we should do is we should say this building will be around for 50 years and we should give 1/50th of its carbon footprint and put that into the equation, but we don't. We just ignore it. And that's quite a problem because it'll appear when you're looking, probably, if they've got the energy efficient right, that we might be able to make this building just as energy efficient as all the little buildings, but they're not looking at the capital cost. And when we do carbon footprinting, the guidance that we use to carbon footprinting tells us to exclude the capital items. So back to the dental practice, we looked at number of visits, time spent on procedure, etc., the value of procedures, claims, on all of this stuff, travel, procurement, energy and waste, and water. Waste is an interesting one because actually the amount of money that it costs to get rid of that plastic bottle, and a lot of it is money. So if you're comparing, if I got another type of water bottle with a plastic water bottle, put it beside it, again, one was made in China and one was made in Germany, the German one's probably going to be more expensive, maybe, and therefore the German water bottle will end up with more carbon dioxide emissions. And we'll go, how is that possible? It's the same water, it's the same plastic bottle. But that's one of the flaws in the process, is that we use money to convert, so that we can convert an item of goods of a particular type. So a plastic conversion will be different than this bottle conversion, and then we work out how much carbon dioxide emissions it is. But waste, we don't really attribute much to waste. And there was an interesting research that I again found out about the weekend, where somebody looked at the carbon footprint of a dental X-ray machine, and I'm like, okay, cool. So you did all this, but did you investigate the carbon emissions of the actual X-ray unit? And the guy went, no, we didn't. I'm like, it's a whole lot of really valuable minerals, etc., and nobody extracts it, so that just goes to landfill. I assume the toxic bits are taken out and then it just goes to landfill. And it's cheap to throw things in landfill, so we don't actually attribute costs to waste at all. We just chuck them in the hole in the ground. There's still a bit of a flaw on that. Can you see the flaw with all my data? What would you... Sorry? Yeah, it's only in Scotland. It's only from one group of researchers, really. It's like Dwayne. There's not a lot of carbon footprinting being done in dentistry. And if I was trying to sell you fluoride and I was saying, we've got all these amazing results from fluoride, look, they're all Dwayne results, you would question it, because there's only one researcher. There's more researchers now, but this is basically, there's not a lot of carbon footprinting done in dentistry. In fact, I only know of 2 studies. We found out some work today, but they're not published or they're not readily available. So this study is flawed, but we have to start somewhere. And in 10 years' time, we'll probably look back on this carbon footprinting and go, actually, this kind of study was flawed, but it's a start. And we have to start somewhere. Otherwise, 10 years' time, if we started doing carbon footprint when we knew exactly how to do it, your planet is 10 years more down the line. And I say your planet because actually, you guys will probably be alive, maybe another 50, 60 years, 60, 70 years. You have to worry about this more than I do. So which question is the most carbon intensive? And which cumulative dental procedure generates the most carbon in total? This is a question for the audience before I tell you. Which procedure do you think is the most carbon intensive? Endo?
Yeah.
Why? Yeah. Possibly?
Yeah.
Why else?
Multiple appointments.
And why are the appointments an issue?
The trouble.
I'm not saying it's the right answer, I'm just useful to know what your why. Any other thoughts on what might be the most? Prosthodontics, yeah, also quite high. What cumulative dental procedure generates the most carbon in total? If we had to get rid of one procedure and I said, right, we're going to cut your carbon emissions and get rid of one procedure, again, wouldn't be good for dentistry perhaps, but let's just say that we could do it. What would you get rid of?
Exam.
Sorry?
Exam.
Yeah, I was thinking, have you heard this presentation before? But no, yes, you get rid of the examination. Get rid of the examination. You're told you the answer now. I mean, there's a couple of things to think about that. First of all, you think, well, that's actually ridiculous. Why would you get rid of the examination? But how many of you in the room do 6 monthly, thinking that you're a dentist, but how many of you in the room do 6 monthly examinations? Give me a hand shot of people who would see their patients in 6 months' time, every 6 months. This isn't a mocking thing. So, maybe 40%. Who would do 12 months? Yeah, about 20 or 30%. Is there any right answer to how often we examine our patients?
in my school, we do it accordingly to the patient itself. So we screen them, we look for the plaque index, and according to the teeth brushing technique, we ask them to come back between 6 and 12 months.
Now I was going to say perfect, that's the right answer until you said 6 to 12 months, because I would say that some people could probably go without an examination for 24 months. And if you read we've got nice guidelines, they're quite dated now, 2001, which is some quite nice series of British guidance on everything in healthcare. It's exactly that, it's risk-based. And yet in the NHS in England, should say the NHS, the National Health Service in the UK, has 4 different countries and they all operate quite differently. The National Health Service in England still pay dentists to see patients every 6 months. And that's really quite significant from a sustainability perspective. The NHS in Scotland has just changed the way it does its examinations, and it's exactly as your colleague and a lot of you in the room suspected or should know, that it should be a risk-based approach. That people with high caries rates might get seen every 3 months, but people with really low disease rates, you could maybe see them in a year or 2. I haven't been to the dentist for 5 years. I should probably go. I shouldn't say that now as a social professor in doing public health. That's probably funny. I checked my own teeth, but maybe I should check somebody else. So my carbon footprint from a dental person's perspective is 0. Right, let me show you. You probably can't. Can you see this? Whole lot of numbers here, but basically the volume of examinations is 41%. So the proportion of the total carbon footprint of dental services, that examinations is 27%. But when you look at the individual procedure footprint the carbon footprint per individual procedures, you're right, at 401, it's the acrylic dentures. And that's not done on anything amazing. That's basically done on how much time they spend in the chair and how often they can come, how often they have to come. And we know as a denture, it could be 5 visits. For some of our dental students, it could be 12 or 13. That's partly because some of the patients, I think, going to dental hospital just like to visit their young, chatty students and spend hours with them complaining about their dentures that probably fit anyway. You could obviously manipulate these results because you could just find a procedure that involved lots of time in the chair. We haven't done any life cycle assessment of the stone that we use in our denture making. There'd be some interesting research looking at if you use scanning type technology, CAD/CAM type technology to produce your crown or bridge, you'll probably find that's more sustainable. Anything that you can do to reduce your patient travel and reduce the time in the chair will knock their carbon footprint down. We don't know about the resources yet, and that's a flaw. So where does most of the carbon footprint come from? Think about the carbon footprint that you saw of the General Health Service before, and then look at ours. What's significant about it? Does someone want to tell me? Anyone want to comment on how it was different from the other one, just so that you don't have to listen to me? More travel, less? Yeah, so procurement's, the things that we have more control over is less, because before they were not only procuring goods, they were also procuring services, but procurement is a lot less. So what we were talking about before about engaging with manufacturers and mandating manufacturers to provide us with carbon dioxide emissions and lobbying Europe to actually make that happen isn't as significant for dentistry, but is significant for healthcare in general. But travel is huge. So again, as dentists, we need to do everything we can to reduce our patient travel. And there's lots of ways we can do that, and we'll talk about that shortly. But look at the nitrous oxide release as well. Also depends on where your energy comes from. In the UK, our energy came from gas and electricity. If you're using solar power, if you're using wind power, you reduce your carbon footprint. So what can we do to reduce carbon emissions? And as I was explaining to my colleague, talked to my colleague Sarah this morning, about these slides. This is where I feel like we could have done less words, more talk. This was just again to show you the difference. Research institutions, for those of you who are passionate about research, and I have just got a huge list of all the things that I'm quite keen to research now on this. We need to carry out research into standardizing carbon modeling methodology, but it needs to be better, it needs to be more precise, it needs to be more consistent. And we need to carry out research into how to include carbon emissions into cultural analysis of health interventions. So we need to do life cycle analysis of every product that we use, from where it gets manufactured and all the carbon associated to produce it into a product that we can reuse. When you think about all the products we use in dentistry, none of them end up being reused. Huge amounts of things that dentists can do, and I'm not going to read this list. Probably will end up reusing. Probably will end up reading this list. Does your practice use renewable energy? What kind of electrical equipment are you using? And is it the most appropriate to use it, or is it appropriate to find something that's more energy efficient? It's one of those questions, though. You know, who of you in the room, if I mean, this is a difficult question. If you're a group of Americans, you would probably all own your own car. Is it better to drive a 10-year-old car, or is it better to keep upgrading it every 2 or 3 years and go for the most energy efficient electric car? It's kind of a rhetorical question, but I think it's probably best to stay with the old car. Because again, every time you purchase a newer car, somebody has to get rid of your old car. And whether you're passing that down, that's fine. But still, if we are a society that reused our products more, you know, what happens to your old phones? How many of you keep your phones for 2 years or try and keep them going? Because at the end of the day, somebody the planet has to sort out your old phones. Work with industry to reduce the energy use of dental equipment. That's about what we were talking about before, working with manufacturers and making it compulsory for manufacturers to actually have to do something. Ensure your practice. And a lot of this stuff is stuff that we should be doing at home. Ensure your house is well insulated. Ensure your practice is well insulated. Think about green power. Think about sustainable power. All the things that you could be doing at home. But consider doing a waste audit. Because a lot of the times we think our dental practices are putting our waste in the most appropriate place. When we did a walk around the Dublin Dental Hospital, we were kind of shocked, I think, to see how they were disposing of their waste. How do you define what contaminated waste is and what do you do with it? If you have a box of gloves, for example, and the box of gloves has been in your clinical environment with probably a little bit of saliva spattered on it, but it looks visibly clean, do you throw it in general waste? Do you throw it in recycle? Or do you throw it in infectious waste? And a lot of healthcare organisations are doing things differently. And that's really going to affect the cost of how you get rid of your waste. And for those of you who own your own practices, waste management is one of the best things you can do, not only to save cost, but also to become more sustainable. Water efficiency, no water leakage, etc. Think about travel. If you've got a family, try and see the whole family at once. Longer appointments, try and do more in the chair. If you're in remote communities, is there any way that you can carry out remote dentistry? Is there any way that you can do prevention in schools, for example, so your patients don't have to come and visit you, but you put fluoride varnish on 60 children in one and only travel once to do it? Is there anything you can do out in the community? And again, when we talk about centralising healthcare services, is that good for travel? Probably not, because patients are travelling far more and more to it. Provide information to your patients and staff on how to travel to your practice. Think about your role as leader within an organisation. People respect you as a dentist. Some of you will deserve more respect than others, but people do respect you as a healthcare professional. If you put posters on your waiting room, on sustainability, whether that be specific to your dental practice or not, you could influence the way your patients live their lives. Review your expenditure. The less you can buy, the better. Try to use all the solutions and materials that you purchase. And again, we talked about how we can influence companies. We've got some, those of you who are interested, there is a dental sustainability blog that we set up a few years ago with the Centre for Sustainable Healthcare. I'm not sure where this presentation will be sent around. The link is here. This was basically an NHS England thing that healthcare commissioners and healthcare services should think about where they locate their services. And I just want to talk about a couple of things that we're doing from a research point of view. We've recently, we're about to publish on this, we recently went to the British Dental Industry Association. We asked about 750 odd people what they thought about sustainability. And there's some interesting results on that, and we're about to publish on that. We found that there was no differences between dental nurses and dentists on their thoughts on sustainability. A few other interesting things. We've published on carbon footprint. A couple of our publications there. This was my presentation at Yale, and we were saying that we hope that you guys can maybe influence your organizations on how we become, on teaching sustainability. Ask the people who develop your curriculum why you haven't been taught sustainability as part of your curriculum. We only spend, we run one problem-based learning session in our dental hospital, and I give one lecture on sustainability. It's not huge, but we do need to get this message out to healthcare professionals because it is important. And probably 2 hours in the whole course isn't much to ask. You might question whether it's enough. We have an electronic learning tool. I think this may be only available to people under the NHS, though, still, unfortunately, although we are trying to change that. We also have a poster that we produce, top 10 tips for sustainable dentistry. And we're about to produce a series of information sheets looking at all of those things over the next few months. So I'm happy to keep in touch with Ed Sir about that so that you know where we put those online. But they'll all be freely online. We're hoping to produce about 50 or 60 more detailed tips about how you can become more sustainable as dentists. And that's my contact details if anybody is interested. Thank you.